Welcome to the March 5th, 2025 episode of the Energy Show. I'm energy journalist Markham Hislop, and today we're going to be talking about American President Donald Trump's punitive tariffs on Canada. 25% on all goods except for oil and gas, which are at 10%, and I guess electricity exports are not tariffed at all. Look, I'm sick and tired of talking about Donald Trump, and I'm pretty convinced that you're sick and tired of hearing about Donald Trump. But the truth is that Trump is in the process of rewriting the post-war consensus around global geopolitical power. And that means that, and he's using economic policy and tariffs to do it. And the best explanation I've heard so far is that Trump sees the world in terms of big geopolitical blocks. So there's China and Asia, there's Russia and Europe, there's North America, and he wants to be the king of North America, as it were, at least the boss of North America, let's say. And so he's going to bully his partners, the junior partners in North America, into doing what he wants to do, and to the advantage of the United States as he sees it. All right. Let's go through some stuff. I want to talk about some of the things he's done today, and then we want to talk about the strategy that we should be using to respond to him. And we've had a couple of shows about this, but I really want to lay it out clearly for you today. Okay, so here's what he said about on Truth Social, his social media network, about Justin Trudeau. I quote, "I also told Governor Justin Trudeau of Canada that he largely caused the problems we have with them because of his weak border policies, which allowed tremendous amounts of fentanyl and illegal aliens to pour into the United States." So that's what he wrote earlier today. We now know that the sum total of fentanyl that crossed from Canada into the United States last year was 19 kilograms. Could have fit in a backpack. And not only that, but the people he should be mad at are his own border guards, because it's not Canada's job to keep things out of the United States. That's the United States border guards, the custom agents. This point seems to be lost on him. And the other thing, illegal aliens, I think is even less of a problem than the minuscule one that is fentanyl. So essentially, Donald Trump is either stupid, a liar, or a stupid liar. And that seems kind of harsh, but I don't know what other conclusion we can come to. But I'll tell you the one conclusion we should come to is that the rules-based order that we've been accustomed to since essentially, shortly after the World War II in 1945 is coming to an end, or at least is severely threatened by Trump's approach. And uncertainty is what comes along with that kind of dismantling of institutions and disruption in trade relations. So what did he do today that caused more uncertainty in the Canadian economy? Well, one of the things he did was give a 1 month tariff exemption to automakers. Now, why would he do that? Well, because he got phone calls from the CEOs of GM, Ford, and Stellantis, which is the parent company of the Chrysler brand. So if you want to change the policy, just give Donald a call. He'll probably take your call. And if you're a CEO, and then you can get the policy changed. And we understand that the 10% tariff on oil and gas was reduced from 25 because apparently the CEO of the American Petroleum Institute had gotten on the phone and talked to Donald and persuaded him that this is a really stupid idea. And to save face, I guess he had to lower it to 10%. Couldn't be zero, but at least 10%. Okay, and not only that, a White House spokesperson later said that the president is open to even more exemptions. He's willing to carve out other things. Now, I don't know what a 1 month exemption does. It does basically nothing. I mean, if you're the CEO of Ford or GM, are you going to make investment decisions based on a 1 month exemption? That means nothing to you. I mean, sure, you can stockpile move some inventory from Canada down into the US, and that'll hurt your Canadian operations and bolster your American operations. At least you can keep product moving out of your factories. But it really doesn't do anything, not even in the medium term, not even in the short term. This is just like a stopgap measure. I had Torsten Jackard, a professor of economics at the University of British Columbia, on last week. And one of the things he said was, and this is echoed by other economists that have interviewed on this show, but he said uncertainty is worse for the economy than tariffs because nobody wants to invest. If you don't have a stable, rules-based order where people can invest and anticipate they're going to get a return in a reasonable period of time, it's not going to get messed with. If you don't have that, then capital stays in people's pockets or it goes someplace else. And the business community has been telling us this for years. I mean, they've been making complaints about, government regulations like the federal government here in Canada. But now we have a supposed billionaire president who prides himself on being a savvy businessman, the art of the deal, and just by creating uncertainty with his erratic behavior is making things worse for the very people that he supposedly whose interests he represents. It's utterly it's crazy. I have yet to see anybody who can actually provide a rational explanation for why Donald Trump does Donald Trump. But anyway, okay. So the response from Canada has, I have to say it, folks, I'm really disappointed. Our response has been entirely predictable. The moment those tariffs were announced, now we usually do energy news, which is oil, gas, and electricity, and then some of the related industry like the transportation, which is closely tied to oil industry, the power sector, that kind of thing. So on the oil and gas side, the very first, I don't even think he had finished his televised address or however he got the information out about the impending tariffs. The usual suspects were out crying for more pipelines, crying for more liquefied natural gas plants on the West Coast, and why don't we have them on the East Coast? And why are we, importing oil in the East, in Eastern Canada? Why don't we, build a pipeline out to the east so we can? It is as predictable as the sun coming up in the east every morning. It never fails. And so here's the problem. There's a problem with this is there is not a private company like Enbridge or TC Energy or any pipeline company that wants to build a pipeline across provincial or international borders, like the Trans Mountain expansion. Why would they? Kinder Morgan abandoned that project in 2019, and the Canadian government had to buy it and we thought that the completing the Trans Mountain expansion project would cost $5.7 billion. It turned out to be $34 billion. That's and given the fact that that was already 5 or 6 years ago, uh, what are the odds that anybody wants to risk capital on a pipeline? And beyond the regulatory issues, beyond the issue around Aboriginal consultation, which in Canada is required by Section 35 of the Constitution, we can't get around it, and the fact that you couldn't build a pipeline faster than 5 years. By the time you got all it designed and reviewed and consultations took place, and then you had to construct it, I'd be surprised if it actually wasn't 7 or 8 years or longer. But let's say five at a just to be generous. Um, Nobody wants to do it, which means, and I've had economists, Kevin Byrne of S&P Global and Ken Fellows, economists from the University of Calgary, and others who are saying that that then will require public taxpayers' money to de-risk those projects. And a number of them are quite confident that the taxpayer will have to fund 100% of those projects. So if you want another pipeline to the West Coast, does that mean it's going to cost taxpayers another $34 billion? If you want one to the East Coast, is that going to cost us another $34 billion? If you want to build more liquefaction plants on the West Coast, how many billions of dollars is that going to take? Do we have enough billions of dollars to do all of that? Meanwhile, there are other industries, like mining and forestry and automotive and so on, that they need help. I mean, we don't have an unlimited amount of capital here. I wish we did. We're in good shape financially at the federal level, but we don't have unlimited pools of capital. It's just as simple as that. So I find this baying for pipelines and LNG to be unrealistic. And not only that, I mean, anybody who pays attention to what we've been doing here at Energy Media for the last 11 years knows that we believe very firmly that the this energy transition that we're in now is fundamentally different from anyone that's gone before. There is a technological revolution that's going on. We see it all around us. I mean, and it's been going on for a long time. Digital and AI and software and Internet of Things and materials and chemistry and on and on and on. Energy is a subset of that revolution. And now energy is not coal, oil, or gas. It's not a commodity that you dig up and you combust and then you turn it into work using like an internal combustion engine or a boiler or a furnace, something like that. You generate electricity using whatever wind turbine or solar panels, and then you apply it directly to work, which is like, you know, apply it to an electric motor and do it. It's much more efficient. And when you build that technology in factories, it looks more like electronics manufacturing. This is the point that Mike Andrade, who's the CEO of Solar Morgan in Toronto, and he's been on this show on my podcast a couple of times, and he makes this point. He said, "Look, I've been in this business 30 years, and when you're building something like solar panels, or batteries is even a better example. It looks more like electronics manufacturing than it does traditional energy extraction." And he said that's why costs are going to fall and fall and fall, and efficiency and effectiveness is going to go up and up and up, even though costs are falling. That's not the way it works with oil and gas. So uh, that's a real problem. And if we believe that the International Energy Agency, in its forecasts, has essentially got it right in their modeling that it's likely that uh, global oil demand will peak in 2030. And the reason I say that is because there's so many others that agree with them. S&P Global, it's a big international consulting company, Bloomberg NEF, Rystad out of Norway. I mean, on and on. I read these things. And there are a few that agree with OPEC, which is considerable growth out to 2050. Most agree with the International Energy Agency. And I think their modeling, frankly, is the assumptions are better. And especially the fact they recognize that China is driving what Kingsmill Bond of Ember in a show last week I was on Monday, called the Electrotech, which is, you know, uh, solar, wind, EVs, batteries, heat pumps, electrolyzers, and so on. So anyway, the point here is that the global energy system is in a major structural shift. We've seen this before in the past. It's not like this is new, or sorry, it's not like it's never been seen in human history before. But it's different this time. And Canada has been slow to recognize that it's different. I mean, aside from Energy Media, I am hard put to think of, a number of academics or think tanks or and so on that actually get this theory. And when you step outside Canada and you go into Europe or Asia, even into the United States, you can find lots of people. This is an entirely different conversation. How are we so isolated here? We are so parochial and inward looking that we have absented ourselves from the international debate around the energy transition. And now you're saying, oh, well, hang on a second, Markham. Paris Climate Agreement. We've been involved in that, right from the beginning, and we've had all these targets, and federal government has brought in policies, and provincial governments, most of them, have brought in policies. Two different things. Fighting climate change is squeezing emissions out of the old economy for the most part, while to some extent adopting the new clean energy technologies. But what China has done, and China is just the best example of this because you see industrial policies in the US and Europe and elsewhere. But China has taken the strategy of using industrial policy, so of subsidizing and supporting both the manufacturing of clean energy technology and its deployment. And so it is moving at lightning speed. We used to talk about internet time 20, 30 years ago. Now we talk about China time. I mean, they have cut they cut the time to do everything, and make they get it to market, and it's it speeds things up. So What this is a problem. Like if so, here we are in Canada. We've got this oil and gas industry that generates lots of government revenue, which is why governments are so interested in preserving it. And not only are we staring down, the loss of our 4 million barrels a day market in the United States, or maybe it's diminished, whatever it is, but it's threatened, is the point. And so we want to preserve it by building new infrastructure that we can't, take a pipeline 5 years or so, LNG plant probably that long or longer. And not on top of that, we are staring down the barrel of peak oil demand in 2030, peak gas demand probably, well, the IEA says 2030 for gas as well. Why would we do that? That's a major risk. That's a major risk factor that the demand that you count on to build new infrastructure to tap new markets isn't going to be there. So there's a lot of reasons why we should just back up a moment, and I want to talk to you about that because we've advocated here that we need a new national energy strategy. We've said take a beat. Like, for instance, the oil tariffs. We've had economists on who say, look, as long as 50% of that extra cost, and at 10%, it's likely around $6 or $7, as long as it's 50% or less that the refiners have to bear themselves, or the producers have to bear, like if it's a third, a third, a third between the producers, the refiners, and the consumers, then probably it's not going to change much. There won't, the market will rebalance itself, and there might be some substitution of light sweet crude for Canadian heavy and American refiners, yada yada yada. But it won't be a major retooling. So we're not going to see probably not going to see any major implications yet for oil and gas production. Oil mostly in Alberta, gas between Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. Take a beat, folks. Relax. Well, not relax, but just take a beat. And what we should be doing is bringing the provinces and the federal government together, bring together think tanks, bring together advocacy groups, bring together all the folks who have something to say about the energy transition and energy in general, and coming up with a national energy strategy. This is not rocket science. I mean, Donald Trump came in and said, we're going to have energy dominance, and it's dumb and it doesn't work, but it's a national energy strategy of sorts. At least everybody's got knows where the federal government is going in the United States. They don't like it, but they get where it's going, and they can plan accordingly. We don't do that in Canada, and we really need one. This is now we need to do things differently. This is the way to start. Have a conversation about these issues, talk it out, come up with some ideas, come to some conclusions or some agreements on things that we can do, some tactics, and then get a plan to put it in place. I mean, to take 3 months or 6 months to do all of that is not a major imposition. If we had somebody who was leading the parade, and presumably we're going to have another, a new prime minister on March 8th, and Mark Carney is leading the polls. So odds are he's the odds-on favorite to be the new prime minister, and he's an economist. He's the perfect guy to lead this. Instead, what he's talking about is, yeah, we're going to build infrastructure and we're going to build, he makes it sound like he's all on board with pipelines. He's part of the problem, not part of the solution. So we need some leadership to emerge that will lead this national energy strategy so that we understand the issues. We need to talk about the energy transition. We can't get away from that. And we need to talk about timelines and who's going to pay for what, all of that good stuff. And the onus is on us to get it done quickly. We can't tarry at this. We can't muddle through as we normally do. We need to get on it. Okay, so we want to propose here at Energy Media that Peter Lougheed 2.0 ought to be the guiding light. And I think it was February 27th, we had an episode where we talked about what that meant. But I'll give you, just as a recap here, the principles that guided Peter Lougheed from 1971 to 1986, when he was Alberta Premier, and he did so much to advance the oil and gas industry, things like making ethane from natural gas available. So they would develop the petrochemical industry that they have now, second largest in North America. Things like the Alberta Energy Company, the Aostra, which develops steam-assisted gravity drainage, which is makes half of the oil sands oil, on and on and on. And so here are his principles. Behave like an owner because you are an owner. Under the Constitution, the provinces control natural resources. That means that essentially the oil and gas resources of Alberta belong to Albertans. They don't belong to the Crown owns the mineral rights. They lease it to companies, and then they get royalties on top of that from the sale, whatever revenue the companies generate. So behave like an owner. Think is if you rented a house, you owned the house, you would think like an owner of the house. That's what way we should approach oil and gas resources. Collect your fair share. Now, I don't want to get into the whole, oil and gas royalties thing because that's very contentious. And so we'll leave that for another day. Save for a rainy day. Now, Lougheed created the Heritage Fund, and then successive governments raided it for general revenues. And now the current Premier, Danielle Smith of the United Conservative Party, says that they're going to revive it. So I'm skeptical. The government is running a deficit this year. This is not good. So there's really no money to put into the Heritage Fund, at least not in any substantive way. Four, add value. I'm going to talk about this in a moment. Go slow. Go slow. Lougheed said to the lawyer, he'd like to dot the I's and cross the T's. Take your time and get it right. And it's still, even advocating go slow, he did a whole lot in a short period of time. So I guess the get it right and move on it is, but do it methodically, maybe is the best way to explain it. Practice statecraft. Oh my God. Have we not seen out of Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular? That is not that's the opposite of statecraft. There's constant fighting with the federal government, constant fighting with other provinces when proposals come up that you don't like, not negotiating, not building coalitions to advance your interests, to advance legislation that would satisfy whatever it is you're trying to do. That's statecraft. And that's been practiced in Canada for like 160 years almost, because that's when you have a weak central government, as we do, and 10 strong provinces, the federal government can't tell the provinces what to do in areas where it doesn't have jurisdiction or it has shared jurisdiction. It has to negotiate. So if you don't come to the table and negotiate and know what you want and be able to build a coalition of your, fellow premiers and so on around the, think tanks and business community, whatever it is, labor, all of that. If you can't build that coalition and do it, then you're not going to get what you want. And we need to go back to what Lougheed said, practice statecraft, not culture war politics, which is what Smith and Moe do, and some of the other premiers do as well. Practice statecraft. Go back. We need to learn that lesson all over again. Okay. So we have some ideas on a national energy strategy that we think are useful. So I want you to, think about this. First of all, we need a short-term, medium-term, and long-term approach to this. There are immediate threats. That there's no doubt about it, and there's a very good chance that Alberta oil producers could get slapped pretty hard. And Professor Kent Fellows suggested that curtailment might be the best approach, where the Alberta government they did this in 2018, 2019, where basically they say we're going to curtail production by X amount of barrels per day. And in 2018, then Premier Rachel Notley said it was going to be 325,000 barrels a day, and might have lasted into 2020. I think there was some ratcheting down of it before it was phased out. And nobody liked it, but that's what had to be done at the time because there was a leak on the Keystone pipeline and supply was building up. But that's what had to be done. And so the government moved and did it. And maybe we need to do things like that. So there's short-term immediate threats that have to be addressed, and we need to protect Canadian interests. Now, then there are midterm strategies. So what about looking at using existing infrastructure? So we learned last week that the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline actually has using friction reducing agents that its output could be optimized for another up to 300,000 barrels a day, out to the West Coast, put it on a ship, $2 to $4 gets you out to markets in Asia or wherever there's demand for it. So don't build another pipeline. Make better use of the one you have. And here's one that this is a particular bugaboo for me because Knockley's government it was 2018 brought in a program to promote partial upgrading of heavy bitumen. Now, the reason for this is that bitumen is like peanut butter, right? And so, once you get it all ready to go, you have to dilute it with 20 to 30% lighter hydrocarbons, diluent. And that 20 or 30% really it's not generating you any revenue. It's just taking up space in the pipeline to make your dilbit flow in the pipeline. So if you could partially upgrade it to a medium or a heavy crude that would still flow in the pipeline, you might get 20 or 30% of your pipeline. So why wouldn't we do that? I mean, why would we not apply, partially upgrade the oil that we send through Trans Mountain expansion or the Trans Mountain system, because there's actually a couple pipelines. Why wouldn't we do that? And why wouldn't we do that to other markets? That maybe we want to, I don't know, maybe in the existing pipeline system down into the United States, because we're not going to lose all that 4 million barrels a day of market right away. Some of it's going to be threatened, but a lot of it will be there for a long time yet. So instead of worrying about building Keystone XL or any other pipeline, make better use of what we've got. Like, be smarter. And it's not that the companies, like the producers, like the Cenovus's and Imperial Oils and Suncors and so on, it's not that they don't know about this stuff, but these are big corporations and they're ruled, not ruled, but they have an engineering culture. I worked in the industry for 5 years and I talked to engineers every day. And one of the things you quickly learn is oil and gas engineers are incredibly risk averse. And it makes perfect sense. First of all, you got to get it right? I mean, you don't want things breaking but if let's say that you use some new technology in a well and it breaks, and it might cost you $1 million by the time you finish working over that well and replace all the tubing or whatever it is that the pump, whatever it is you've broken. And that looks bad on you, and it maybe affects your bonus. And so engineers are absolutely incentivized within the industry to be very cautious. Better to do what you know that works, even if it doesn't work well. But if it works at all and you're still making money, keep doing that thing. And what that does a lot of times is it just keeps them locked into the status quo. No, sorry, we're not going to risk maybe lowering our output so that we don't meet our targets, and then our investors punish us by bailing on our stock, that kind of thing. So somebody else has to take the lead on this, and the Alberta government is just the obvious one. They did it once, canceled in 2019 by incoming Premier Jason Kenney, and they need to revive it again. And and not only that, Professor Fellows did a study, and he said that one of the major benefits of this was that there was actually an uptick, as he called it, in value of $10 to $15 per barrel when you partially upgrade. So you move the dilbit to a medium or heavy crude. I don't know if those numbers are still valid, but the very fact that you increase the value just makes so much sense. So we should do this. I mean, it's just like optimizing the pipeline infrastructure we have that includes, stronger pumps and friction reducing agents and partial upgrading. Why are we not looking at this? Okay, so that's we have medium term strategies that we have to look at. Now, I'm not sure if this is a medium or long-term strategy, but I think we need to put this on the table. And that is, instead of burning our hydrocarbon resources, we turn it into materials. Now, I've been reporting on the bitumen beyond combustion program that started up in 2017, almost from the beginning. And this is in Alberta. Alberta Innovates is the agency. And I can tell you that they say they are very close. Probably next year they will have a commercial process to turn bitumen into carbon fiber precursor. And I'm working on a show entirely devoted to that. It'll include clips from the various interviews with scientists that I've done over the years and people who run the program and why this is such a good thing. Now, here's the thing. Yes, it will create more value. And we'll get into all of that, during that show. But what it does, if there was an advanced materials manufacturing industry in Alberta that used bitumen as a feedstock, so we're not burning it when you send it down to refineries, you're not making it into gasoline and diesel, making it into materials, you're creating a domestic market. You're replacing the foreign market that now is uncertain, and that would include, I would say, international markets, I would argue, are also increasingly uncertain. And you're building your own market at home where you diversify. So you build this industry, this advanced materials manufacturing, and it has supply chains. So it needs labor and it needs inputs, it needs equipment, and it needs services. All of that can be in Canada. So why wouldn't we, as a medium to long-term strategy, start investigating, what do we have to do to get this process, speed it up, get it out into, commercial ready so it's ready to scale, and then what do we have to do to scale it? And did I forget to mention the Alberta government owns the intellectual property to this? Could you imagine if this works the way the scientists think it'll work? The Alberta government actually owns the rights to it. I mean, this makes way too much sense. I know it's uncertain, but you know what? This is how China started the electric vehicle industry 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. You start small and you scale it up over time. And so as the energy transition intensifies and accelerates, and oil demand comes down over time, maybe starting in the mid 2030s, that sort of thing, you're building a new domestic market that will provide, you can sell that product into your advanced manufacturing industry. These are the things we need to talk about. I'm not saying that this is a 100%, guaranteed to be successful. Let's put it on the table, hear from the experts who know, and decide whether this is something we want to get into. And there are alternatives to the LNG and pipeline proxies. What the people who are in think tanks and trade associations and so on. All they do is what they're told to do, and they don't want to think outside the box. They get this little box. The box was worked. They're mad because they didn't get the expand the box, with other pipelines down the road, and they want to say they can't think outside of that. And if there was ever a time in Canadian history where we need to think outside of the box, it's now. But we're not doing it. And so we need leadership and we need a process and we need to come together, national energy strategy. Okay. Well, I'll give you one more idea, and this is in Alberta. Again, I've done this. If you go into our website, energi.media, you'll see where it says up in the nav bar, it says unethical oil. And I did a long report on the environmental liability, unfunded environmental liabilities for the conventional oil and gas industry. And folks, it's an absolute nightmare. The Alberta Energy Regulator itself in 2018 estimated unfunded liabilities to be $130 billion. And the best guess, no, this group also did the oil sands at $130 billion. Here's a truth that we are going to have to grapple with. The regulators in Alberta and in other jurisdictions around North America have never taken security against reclamation for when that well is done or that asset is done, it needs to be reclaimed, cleaned up. They've never taken money against it. They've always assumed that the oil company will be in good shape, and when the time comes, they will just pay for it. And that has never worked. That's how we got into this mess. So one of the things that could be done is money could be directed to cleaning up that mess. So the taxpayer doesn't get stuck with it. There's lots of things we can do that we aren't putting on the table that need to be put on the table. So we are going to be putting together a campaign. We're talking to other groups, maybe a coalition of the willing, to advance this idea of a national energy strategy, to look at alternative ideas for how we can use our energy resources better. What's coming? What are we going to have to grapple with? We know what the immediate threat is. Are we going to deal with the energy transition only when it starts to, destroy oil and gas markets and our government revenues are reduced? Is that, can't we, other countries manage to be, put in place policies to anticipate future change? Can we not do that in Canada? All right. Thank you very much for this. We're going to be having a lot more information about this approach that we're trying to put together and what we're going to try to achieve with it and the role that you might be able to play, that you can support it and participate in it and maybe have your say, maybe have some good ideas, maybe you come out of the industry or maybe you come from a related industry where you have some good ideas. And so we would like you to play a role. MC, the Energy Show producer, who often comes on and co-hosts with me, reminded me we need to text us. I of course have forgotten the cell number to text, but you can email us at the Energy Show, ENERGI at gmail.com. And we're going to have a show very shortly for comments. We've just had so much going on. We haven't got your comments, but we promise we will get your comments. But folks, stick on the ice and elbows up. Elbows up, just like Mike Myers said on Saturday Night Live the other day. He whispered it as he had his Canada is not for sale t-shirt on and elbows up. And most Canadians will know that. It's a hockey reference. When the going gets tough, get your elbows up. It's a Gordie Howe reference, actually. So we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.